Hey, Ashutosh, thank you for coming in today. You've got such a remarkable history of success and entrepreneurship and innovation and empowerment. Just simply remarkable. So I really appreciate your coming in and sharing your insights with our audience.
Thank you, Stephen, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to get to know you, and I look forward to an interesting conversation today.
So Ashutosh, you've got this remarkable arc of a real fascinating narrative in terms of your background and what you've done. If you could maybe share, two, three, maybe even four highlights or inflection points in your life that really drove your passion or your insights or changes to become who you are today.
Okay, so let me start with my parents. My father was a very highly decorated soldier. He was a brigadier general, awarded twice by the President of India for gallantry and for service. And I think he was the one person who remained my closest friend right till he passed away 6 years ago. I mean, I don't think there was anyone who was closer to me as a friend. He knew everything about me, and I used to talk to him 2 or 3 times a day. Uh, so I think one big milestone that I think I'm fortunate was to have been born in his family. My second milestone, I would say, was when I started work with India Tobacco, which is a part of British American Tobacco. I think that organization gave me what the then chairman used to say, a preneurial outlook to life, which was a professional entrepreneur. And the company gave me some incredible opportunities to work in large organizations within the big group, as well as to be very entrepreneurial. So I launched some very, very fascinating big brands, which I was associated. The third milestone, I would say, would be my marriage to my wife, Veera, who's a very well known and well acknowledged historian. She and I have very significant differences on political matters. So we agree to disagree on anything political. But most of what I have learned about the world and in all our travels, and I've traveled over 85 countries. I've learned only because of her. And of course, combined with her are our two beautiful sons who are both working outside India. My next milestone was when I gave up my corporate career and became an entrepreneur. And I think that was a very significant move I made when I was 46. I built a chain of pharmacies, which grew in over a period of 15 years into India's largest or second largest pharmacy chain under the brand name Guardian. And my final milestone is in 2010, I decided to become an author. And I wrote my first book. When I told my wife I'm going to write a book, she said, "Oh, tell me another one." And in March of this year, I'll be publishing my seventh book. All of them have done exceedingly well on multiple topics. So I would say these would be key pivotal points in my life.
Those are remarkable pivot points. So I was really curious. Your father, a brigadier general, that's an incredible accomplishment into itself. But he, became a sort of mentor, a friend, and in essence, throughout your life. What were some of the core elements you learned from him?
Okay, so I'm not thinking back. Army officers in India never really earned a very large salary. He retired from the army when he was 52 at a salary which was equal to my salary in my second year of working in the private sector. Right. So therefore, the first thing he taught me was that while money is important, it is not the primary driver for you. And I've always maintained that. I've told every single friend of mine, whatever my net worth be, I don't chase net worth. One extra zero in my net worth is not going to change my life or my happiness. Right. So that's something I've maintained for a long time. The second thing he taught me was that I don't need to justify myself to everybody as long as I am able to justify it to myself. I've told this to my sons, and he always said, every morning when you're standing alone in front of the mirror, shaving, right? And I'm using shaving because I'm a man. If you're able to look at yourself in the eye and say, yesterday I did not knowingly do any harm to anybody, I was honest with myself. That is the only justification you will ever need. And the third thing which he taught me, which I think gave me an incredible amount of strength, was that as your father, I stand by you, whatever you may do, right? My mother didn't agree with that, but that was his and my equation. He says, whatever wrong you may do, I stand behind you. When I come back home, I may take your pants off and whip you, but that's between you and me. To the outside world, you're my son and you can do no wrong. And I think those are three incredible learnings I had from him.
You know, Ashutosh, in the short time that I've gotten to know you, because we work together on an advisory board, I can see those elements. I can see them. Oh man, and that's incredible sort of principles to guide your life. And then you went on to this Indian tobacco company, and you were managing director and you know, based in Singapore and so on as well. And you learned incredible lessons, because you said there were some entrepreneurship aspects to that job. What do you mean by that?
So I'll tell you. The first one was when the company was earlier India Tobacco, and now it's called ITC Limited. They decided in the mid 80s they wanted to diversify. So they had, from tobacco, they had gone into hotels, but they wanted to get into fast moving consumer goods. And they decided they wanted to launch an edible oil brand, which today, incidentally, is a very large brand in India called Sundrop. I was involved not just in launching the brand, but I was also involved in building the factory, which manufactured the oil, which was launched. Of course, after several years, the company was sold, and it belongs to one of the other major international companies. Then I remember this one particularly interesting incident. I was 33 years old. Had spent 13 years with 12 years with the company, and the chairman of the group called me and in Calcutta, and he said, "Ashutosh, the board believes that we need to have an office in Singapore, and we think you are the person who should go." Now, remember, Stephen, that for us in India, traveling overseas was a very big thing. India was a very closed economy in the 80s, and the foreign exchange laws were so stringent that if I had $5 in my account, in my pocket, that was considered illegal, and I could have been jailed. So for a young individual to be given an opportunity to go overseas and work was huge. So I asked the chairman, Mr. Jagdish Sapru, I said, "Sir, I'd be delighted to go, but what is my mandate?" So he just shrugged his shoulders and he says, "I don't know, go and write your own mandate." So that was frightening. So I said, "But sir, you got to give me something in writing." So he pulled out his letterhead from his drawer, and he signed on a blank thing at the bottom, Jagdish Narayan Sapru, and said, "Here's your mandate. Go and write what you think is fit." I went off, my wife and I, with our two little sons, we moved to Singapore. And over a period of 7 years, we built an organization which was $250 million. You know what we were discussing about the Economic Development Board and the Trade Development Board. This company from India was recognized as the first major company that had entered Singapore, et cetera, et cetera. So I was given the freedom and the flexibility to pretty much function as an entrepreneur while ensuring that I did not have to worry about that huge problem of where will I get my money. There was this multi-billion-dollar company backing me.
You know, that's an incredible story, because the chairman to give you that, have that sort of confidence where you can explore, set your innovation and your capabilities, and then have that blossom offshore in a different country, and in Singapore particularly as well. And then to have all of that remarkable success, I could see those elements in the recommendations you get on the advisory board that we sit on. So yeah, and then you have this other bucket, you know, and that's this Guardian Pharmacy. You know, what made you think to enter that field versus others, and then building it to be the second largest in India? That must have had a lot of challenges and so on. So again, you know, what were the kind of capabilities and insights that you gained from that experience?
So let me give you the background. You know, after I left ITC, which was in '96, I spent 8 years in aerospace. I was head of Asia for the big satellites for Lockheed Martin first, and then I was working with Hughes. After 8 years in 2003, which was the year both our sons were leaving home to study overseas, the chairman of Hughes told me pack my bags and move to Germantown, Maryland. And my wife and I said, no, we've just come back from Singapore. We don't want to go back. We want now to settle down in a place which is home for us. So in 31st March 2003, I quit what I call the corporate world. In my first book that I wrote later, I said on the 1st of April 2003, I woke up and I realized that I had joined the ranks of the educated unemployed. I had no job. I had no assistant. My Outlook calendar was empty. I was not traveling at all. And I just thought I was 46. I've earned enough and I don't really want to do very much. I'm going to play lots of golf, etc. I did that for about a month. And then I realized I can't possibly do that for the rest of my life. So I had a very close cardiologist friend who owned a small hospital. And I said, let's start looking at building a chain of hospitals in India. And again, let me take you back to 2003. Healthcare in India is still weak, but in 17, 18 years ago, it was very, very poor. Then we realized we didn't have the capital to be able to build a range of hospitals. So then as I started looking at the hospitals, pharmacies, I said, hey, listen, why can't we build a company like Boots in India? So I wrote my first business plan, which was build Boots in India. I don't necessarily sit and plan for too much. So by May, I had said, let's build a chain of pharmacies. On the 26th of August, we opened our first store. I remember this also, that every time I would go and talk to people, the only luxury I had done was I brought my assistant with me from Hughes to work with me. And I remember she was an elderly individual. She used to keep calling my wife and say, I don't know what's come over him. How on earth is he going to pay my salary and everything else by selling, tablets of paracetamol for, less than $1 a strip? Nobody believed we'd build a chain, but, I kept pressing ahead. And I think by the time we raised private equity, we had already opened 70 stores. And by the time I left, we had 250 company-owned stores. I also brought GNC from the US to India. And India became GNC's 5th largest franchisee in the world. And when I sold my company in 2016, GNC had agreed to manufacture GNC products in India for the first time anywhere else outside the US. So that's what happened. I'm not a pharmacist, but I did believe I had the ability to build something. So that was interesting.
That's really fascinating. And also this 8 years in the aerospace industry. So I always get the feeling that you understand technology and so on. So does that come from your aerospace background?
Yes, it does. And plus, I generally enjoy learning about technology. So, my new videocast podcast series, The Brand Called You, where you'll also be a guest later this month. I have a team of 6 people who work for me. And the oldest of the 6 is 25 years old. I'm 64, right? So, there is so much learning of technology from all these, not even millennials, they're all Gen Zs now, So I really enjoy tinkering around and doing fun things with technology.
Recently I shared with our group this little article I put in Forbes on quantum computing. So you would understand my article.
I did read it. I can't say I understood everything, but I enjoyed reading it.
It's incredible, the diversity of your background, and then that you're still in, creating on a continuing basis. You're writing and you're innovating in so many different ways. I understand you spent some time at Gavi. Can you describe that experience?
Okay. So in 2005, I received an email from, someone search firm, saying that, would you like to join the board of Gavi? Now, I thought it was spam, so I deleted it. I mean, I didn't even know what Gavi was in those days. Then 2 months later, he called me from the US and said, "Hey, listen, did you get my mail?" I said, "Oh, that was your mail. I thought it was spam." So then he said, "Listen, you are one person who's been searched, and we believe you can add value to Gavi. Gavi is been set up by Mr. Nelson Mandela and Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation to meet the fourth Millennium Development Goal of the United Nations, which is to ensure women and child health across the whole world." Uh, that got me a little interested, and then I was flown out to Washington D.C., where I met two other independent board members who I was one of my two of my closest friends in the U.S. now, and that's how the whole journey started. As when I joined them in 2006, I was there from 2006 to 2014, and I now continue as a Gavi ambassador. Uh, I suddenly realized how much of a challenge the world faced as far with vaccination. And I was when I started on the board, I was given a paper produced by Harvard University, which said that the best investment that is made in the world is in vaccines, because every time you protect a child, you are making sure that the child is able to grow up, become a producing adult, an economic producing adult. They're able to start families. They're able to create wealth. So they said that one drop of vaccine brings incredible amount of health to a family. Over the last 17, 18 years, or 21 years, because Gavi was formed in 2000, I think Gavi has vaccinated millions of children and has brought in such an incredible amount of healthcare and hope across the entire world that I feel proud that I was part of it. Now, as someone who's a Gavi ambassador, or or a Gavi alumni, I keep reading what incredible stuff Gavi is doing handling the pandemic, and how they are ensuring the vaccines are available equally to every country around the world. So Gavi was another fascinating experience. I used to give them almost 30 days pro bono every year for 8 years.
That's an incredible amount of contribution in giving, and of course, Gavi is such an important aspect, as you indicated,
Correct.
because of the
Correct.
pandemic, especially today. So,
Yeah.
you also, have this association as chairman of BizDome. Can you talk about that in more detail?
So some of the major business schools in India are called the Indian Institutes of Management, and the top three institutes are in Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and Calcutta. And these institutes have really spawned multiple Indian Institute of Management in India. So there is this Indian Institute of Management, which is a relatively young institute. It's about 5-6 years old, about 100 kilometers from where I live. Their director called me and said, "Hey, listen, would you be willing to come and teach a course on entrepreneurship?" So I said, "I'd love to do that." The only pain was to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours every day, both ways. So there was 4 hours in the car. But in India, we are fortunate, we have drivers, so therefore it's not that difficult. So I ran for 2 years. I ran a program on Indian entrepreneurship. And then the director said that, since you were so closely associated, we've been wanting to set up an incubator, startup incubator at the institute. Would you be willing to chair the incubator? So I said, I would be willing to, but we've got to get our processes absolutely right. We've got to make sure that we document every single thing that we want to do. So I actually wrote up every single policy for the incubator. And I said, you have to, the moment you now start reaching out to multiple people, we cannot assume they know everything. It must be there in black and white. So, and I'm delighted to also learn that thing that I had worked on it, I think it was almost a 100-page document with one of the senior professors of the institute, is now being used as a reference for other incubators within this fraternity. So it was again a fascinating experience. Set up the incubator, which was called BizDome, and allow young individuals, students and non-students, to come and start experimenting with their startups inside the infrastructure provided by the institute.
So I have a question. Is that policy guide that you put together with the professor, is that publicly available? Is that open source, or?
No, it's not in the stores, but I don't. It's not confidential. I can send you a copy if you like.
The reason I mention it is, I'm connected with different UN incubation innovation programs, and
Okay.
they would really benefit for having this accumulated wisdom that they could use to infuse and be better. One
Sure.
example is the World Food Program. They have the largest humanitarian incubator system in the world.
Okay.
So, yeah, it'd be quite useful. And ITU, the AI for Good, also have their own incubators. So,
I'm sure. I'm sure. No, I'd be happy to share it with you.
well,
Right
thank you,
away.
thank you so much. And this is like real-time brainstorming.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're also a member of the
Absolutely.
Advisory Council for the Center for Policy Research. Can you talk more about that?
So I was on the advisory council. I've stepped down. The Center for Policy Research is one of the premier think tanks of the government of India. It's got probably every may be a wrong word, but almost senior bureaucrats who retire, from the chiefs of army staff to Supreme Court justices to commissioners of income tax. They all come and do a 2 or 3 year stint as a part of this think tank because they're able to give back a lot of their learnings. I was invited by the president of the center when I was 36, 37 to serve on the board, as on the advisory board. And, I served for 3 years and I was involved with some incredible, thought thinking that was done on multiple subjects, ranging from the economy to the defense of India to, even talking about what could be done for the next budget, to infrastructure and many other things. So that just gave me an insight into how a lot of the senior bureaucrats think. And then those relationships were so strong that, even today, if I reach out to someone, they are always available to talk and brainstorm with me.
Well, I guess that speaks to trust. And of course, you're being recognized in 95 as a global leader for tomorrow by the World Economic Forum, just a whole list of accomplishments throughout your career. But you are also part of YPO, the Young Presidents Organization. And just for the audience, if they're not familiar, they're 70 years old. They've got 29,000 members, about 9 trillion in annual revenue across 450 chapters in 142 countries, and employ about 22 million. So, but a very private organization as well. So how did you get involved with the Young Presidents Organization?
So the YPO is for those who know, is a very aspirational organization, but it also is an organization where the doors shut after you're 45. So the requirements are very simple. You got to have the title of a president, CEO, or managing director, chairman, etc. You got to be running a company or a business of a certain size, and you have to be below 45. Then you have to be recommended, etc., which process one has to follow. And once you join this organization, you suddenly realize it's the only global organization which not only gives back a lot in learning to you as a member, but it is a very, very embracing organization for spouses and children as well. It's the only organization that I know where you can reach out to any member anywhere in the world, and they will, in more often than not, meet you if you happen to be traveling. I'll give you some, a very interesting example of how this network works. In 99, my mother was critically ill, and she'd been in ICU of a hospital for close to 91 days, and the doctor told me that he needed a small piece of equipment if she was to survive, and it was not available anywhere in India for love or for money. I just reached out into the YPO networks, and I found 2 members, one from Saudi Arabia who owned a hospital and another from Singapore who owned a hospital. I just said, I'm a member from New Delhi. I didn't know either of them. In 2 days' time, that one little device, which was all of probably $250, I had 2 of them, which were in my hands in New Delhi. Both these YPO members did not ask a second question: where am I? Am I genuine, etc. The moment I said I'm a YPO, they had shipped it out. So and there are amazing stories. There was a very senior, there's a YPO member from one of the Latin American countries who would come with a group, and he was up in where the Ganges River is. He went swimming into the river and he disappeared. I was the chair for Delhi in those days. I got a call that we can't find him. We moved the home ministry and we moved the police and we did that and we found him. We found his body 50 kilometers downstream. But we've managed to find the body. We managed to fly his wife down. We got the body cremated, gave the ashes back to his wife and put her back on a plane back home. Now, these are all, and there are millions of such stories where you realize what a powerful organization YPO is. And then the third one of YPO, which I love to talk about, is this incredible product that YPO has, which is called Forum. A forum is a group of 9, 10, 11 people who spend all their time, as a part of this group. In a very structured manner, we meet once every month for a period of 4 hours. So most people say, what can people speak for 4 hours? But you suddenly realize it's such a structured, organized, set of discussions that take place. And the forum, you're sworn to confidentiality. So I am not allowed to come and tell my wife what happened in my forum meeting. That's the amount of confidentiality. And my wife is in a forum herself, and she has the same confidentiality norms. And I've often said that my forum buddies know more about me than probably anyone else does. And this is all in an environment of incredible confidence and incredible security that if I disclose my innermost feelings to my forum buddies, I know that I will get feedback which is not tainted, which is not biased, or which doesn't have an agenda. As a result of that, I'm able to share some of my deepest problems, challenges, etc., with my forum. And this is there for everyone. So I'm a part of 2 forums. One's my Delhi chapter forum and one's an international forum where I've members from different countries as a part of my group.
It almost sounds like you should have forum in a box that you could export to other organizations.
We should. You suddenly realize how close and strong the bonds become. Because if you and I are members of a forum, and I trust you, you trust me, then in a conversation which is not being recorded, but in a conversation that you and I may have either on Zoom or on phone, I will be able to share with you all my problems, and you will be able to guide me. And guidance is also not done in the form of, Ashutosh, you have this problem, I think you should do this. It is always the other way around. Ashutosh, you have this problem. When I faced a similar problem, this is what I did. Because the understanding is that we are both experienced, mature individuals. We both know the answers to our problems. I'm tabling my problem to you. You're sharing your experience, because I will be able to pick up from your experience and find my own answers.
So Ashutosh, you just indicated earlier you're 64.
Yeah.
And yet you indicated this organization has this sort of ceiling of 45. So what's that mechanism that keeps you engaged within this Young Presidents Organization?
So, the name has now been changed from Young Presidents Organization to just YPO. Because what is happening is that, you join the organization when, say, you are 38, 39, average age. Some people join at 45, some people at 32. The average age is about 38, 39, which means that your membership as a young individual is for about 11 years, which is till the time you turn 50. When you turn 50, you graduate from YPO to YPO Gold. So I'm a YPO Gold member because I'm over 50. And I continue as a YPO Gold member till the day I die. Unless, of course, I resign and walk away. So as you know, when I had joined at the age of 37, I think, or something like that, I remember an older YPO member had told me that there are only three things in life that are certain for a YPO member. One is uh, taxes. Number two is death, and the third is graduation to YPO Gold. So I've graduated, but the network is so powerful that you always remain associated.
Well, you've even been the chairman of YPO Gold South Asia. So,
Correct.
this
Yes, I
leadership,
served.
you're also a charter member of TIE. Can you describe that?
So TIE is actually the Indus Entrepreneurs. This was an organization set up in Silicon Valley with the primary objective of getting entrepreneurs together. And now TIE has uh, branches or chapters all over the world. It has now evolved much more beyond Indian entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs from all over the world. So I am a charter member, which means that you are recognized a little more by TIE because of your age and experience. So TIE also does a lot of events, a lot of programs for members, um, and young entrepreneurs find it very, very helpful. At their various sessions. So you got a range of 3 or 4 group well-established entrepreneurs coming and talking to a group of maybe 100 entrepreneurs. Earlier it was physical meetings, now it's online. And that interaction is a very serious amount of learning that is available to young entrepreneurs. So that's what TIE is all about.
You have this tremendous history of entrepreneurship and innovation and building communities and leading companies and working with society and community to enable and empower and just so much. And then you decide to become a writer, and then you've got these 7 highly acclaimed bestsellers, and you're going to have another one coming out soon on how to survive failure and come out stronger. I mean, that's incredible. How did you find that voice and doing that writing?
I've always written. From the time I think I was 10 or 11 years old, I used to write letters to the Times of India, and feel very happy getting them published. I just, when I was young, I always wanted to be study English literature, and I was fascinated with Shakespeare, etc. But I'm the oldest, from both my mother's side and my father's side, and in India, the oldest child is expected to be either a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. I was none of them. I went to do an MBA, but I think writing was always there in my mind. I mean, I used to write a column for major business magazines. I still write for them. I have my own column in the Times of India, which is probably the world's largest circulated English newspaper in India. When I started to write, people have often asked me that, do you write in a particular genre? And I said, no. I mean, I love experimenting with what I do. I don't write under pressure. So I have written a book on 2 books on entrepreneurship. I've written 2 books on fiction. These 2 books are being reviewed by some of the major studios to be made into web series. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but if it does, I'll tell you about it. And that should be good fun. I've written a book on retirement, and the book on retirement was a very, very successful book because it's a book that in the US, people speak about retirement. In India, people don't speak about retirement. It's almost like a taboo. You ask someone who's 58, hey, listen, what are you going to do when you retire 2 years or 4 years from now? And he says, oh, I'll cross that bridge when I reach it. And when they reach that bridge, they haven't planned it all. So I did write a book on retirement, which was Reinvent, Reboot, Rewire, Managing Retirement in the 21st Century. So I wrote that book. And then I have written this new book on failure. Again, this is a hypothesis that I had for a long time, that Indian parents or Asian parents don't teach children it's okay to fail. So because we are always told that, oh, you got to be first in class and you got to be at the head of the queue and et cetera, that has started to manifest itself in our behavior patterns. So if you come and see the traffic in India, in a 3-lane road, you will probably have 6 cars. and at the traffic light, there'll be 9 cars. Because in everyone's mind is, I have to be the first off the block in this traffic light. You know, if a plane full of Indians lands, and this, you know, my comments are not derogatory to Indians. I'm an Indian myself. I'm saying it on a lighter note, that if a plane full of Indians land, the person in the last row in coach will be the first one trying to get out when he knows that there is only one door and the aero bridge is in front. But I have to squeeze my way out somehow because I don't want to wait. So the book is all about, you know, it's okay to fail, take your time, don't be in a hurry. And failure does not mean the end of the world.
You know, those are really transformational messages for the world, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I really encourage everybody to consume anything you're producing because it's so relevant. And then you decide to do this podcast series. You know, I've been doing my own interviews since the 1980s. And in 1 year, you've done everything that I've done in like, 30 years. I mean, you do so many. What is it, like three a week or something like that?
No, I do between 9 and 10 a week.
Oh, wow.
But I do it 3 times a week.
Right.
You know, and so I record on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and I do between 3 and 4 in a day. Again, why, you know, The Brand Called You was my book on personal branding, which was published in 2019. It's a book that has done very, very well. And it's you know, most people say that, why should I talk about myself? You know, let my work do the talking. And that's what conventional wisdom has been. I remember in 1980, you know, I was the executive assistant to an American senior vice president who had come on secondment from Sheraton to ITC, the company I was working with. His name was Patrick Birmingham. And he taught me that if you don't blow your own trumpet, nobody else will blow it for you, right? And then 3 years later, I realized that there was a corollary to that also. So if you don't blow your own trumpet, nobody will blow it for you. But the corollary was, if you don't blow it so hard that it starts to hurt people's ears, right? So, you know, this whole thing of personal branding is something which gradually started to come. And then when I wrote my first book in 2010, I asked a journalist, how do I get my book reviewed by so many newspapers? So he said something which actually shocked me. He says, who knows Ashutosh Garg? I said, why? I mean, you know, I'm all over the place. He says, no, they know Ashutosh Garg ITC Limited. They know Ashutosh Garg Aerospace. They know Ashutosh Garg Guardian Pharmacy. But who's Ashutosh Garg as the individual without the name of the organization? And that got me thinking, which is when I decided that I'm going to start investing in my own name, you know, and in my own self. And if you seriously think about your name, it's the only thing that belongs to you, nothing else. And the only thing that you will leave behind, which is your legacy. Everything else just goes away. So The Brand Called You was a book which I wrote. And the hypothesis has always been that in every country in the world, 15, 20 people are spoken about a lot when there are thousands of amazing stories to be told. So I said, let me start telling the stories of thousands of people. And one thing led to the other. And in less than 2 years, we finished 500 recordings. I've got a waiting list that goes up to middle of March. And people are now writing to me from all over to say, hey, listen, you know, how can we get onto your platform? So I'm actually now looking for a third host. A very dear friend who lives in the US and runs a very large fund. He has started doing interviews as a host, you know, in New York. So, you know, it's just grown. But what is fascinating is the amount of data and information that is available in each of these interviews. And one of these days, I'm going to start curating some of these interviews and start, you know, pulling some information from all of them and combining them into 10, 12, 15-minute segments with multiple individuals addressing the same topic.
You know, that's a tremendous way of providing what I call dendritic thinking, this ability to kind of associate different concepts and people, marry it together and even co-create, create new thought. The Brand Called You is a perfect sort of IP vehicle of shared creative thinking and so on. So just incredible. because you do so many, I mean, over 500 in 2 years, that's an incredible number. What it means then is you really have your pulse on what's happening worldwide.
Yes. Yes.
So now in this next series of questions, we're gonna take this opportunity to mine mine that all of that knowledge that you have. So what do you think about where we're going today? For example, we have things like the fourth industrial revolution, which transformed into society 5.0, or it's smart humanity and so on. What are your viewpoints about, this confluence of rapid innovation with some of the social cultural aspects that are happening with social media and et cetera, et cetera? Give me your crystal ball. Where you see us today, and then maybe a few years.
Okay. So let me start first with what's happening politically. I mean, I am very often on CNN News 18 talking of what's happening politically, etc. I think the world has been through many transitions. From the early 1900s. We had communism come in. We had capitalism come in. We had dictatorship come in. We went into socialism. And what I've often said is that the political leaders, they keep changing the formats. The masses in the world keep hoping that the new format or the new ideology or the new thinking that's coming is going to make my life better. Unfortunately, the masses of the world don't see any change that happens in their lives, as a result of which every 15, 20 years, some new thing happens. In the last 5-7 years, right-wing leaders have got elected all over the world. Right now, the jury is still out on what will happen. I don't see much changes happening, except the individual associated with right-wing leaders suddenly get a lot of prosperity, but the common man continues to be where they are, and I think they will continue where they were. So I think a system has to evolve politically, which will make sure that there is much greater equality amongst the world. That leads me to what technology and social media is doing. When I was growing up, I would read Indian newspapers, I would read The Economist, I would read the Time magazine, I'd read the news magazine, Newsweek magazine. We didn't have access to anything else. And I would, really read a lot of the stuff, and I would form my opinions based on what these superstar journalists would be writing in these magazines or newspapers, right? And I would form my impressions of what is happening in whichever part of the world based on their input. What social media has done is it has democratized news, which means now I don't have to rely on superstar journalists to help me make my opinion based on their opinion. I pick up the data, which is raw data from all over the world, and I can take a call. For example, what is happening in Myanmar. I mean, I've been to Myanmar at least 15, 20 times since 89. And what I'm now seeing, is it a coup? Is it not a coup? A lot of spin doctors will be spinning out lots of fantastic stories, but I don't have to rely on what they're saying because I have an understanding myself through this technology that's available. So therefore, that's one very, very major thing that's happening, and that is beginning to empower the common individual. Second thing that's happening is that the digital platforms that are getting created all over the world. And let me talk about what is happening in my own country, which is 1.35 billion people. In the last 7 years, almost the entire country now has bank accounts. Every time a subsidy has to be given, it is being done through a direct benefit transfer to these individuals, which means that now money is not getting stuck in sticky fingers of people who control dispersal of the money, but it's going directly from the government to the individual. Look at what the entire telecom revolution has done to us. Look at what blockchain is doing. I mean, in my country, land records were always doubtful because it was written in big registers in which people would write by hand. That is now entirely digital. When I would go to get a passport, I had to find someone to give some money to get my passport out, which was my right. Today, I get my passport in 4 days flat, right? I go online and everything happens so fast. So I think the common man has been empowered very, very significantly in the last 5, 7, 10 years across the whole world. And that is going to result in some cataclysmic changes across the whole world, because now everyone has learned their what their rights are. So that's another thing that's happening. Then if you look at what is happening in biotech, if you look at what's happening in artificial intelligence, in machine learning, prices are coming down, technology is getting better. The routine jobs which we used to assume will be done by workers are now being taken over by robots. So I think we are in for some incredible times ahead of us, with all the new digital technology that's coming into our lives, and with all the empowerment that's happening because of social media.
You know, excuse me, I'm a fan of Star Trek from the 1960s and Gene Roddenberry, and he painted this sort of utopian future where all the needs are met, food and so on, and so people can pursue a sort of more purposeful ambition and so on. Do you see that happening then within maybe the next 10, 20 years?
Well, I certainly believe that food will no longer be an issue. There will no longer be any food shortages, despite what the naysayers keep saying, that there will be a global pandemic on account of drought, etc. And how will we feed 8 billion people or 9 billion people in future? But I think productivity levels are going up. The means of farming and agriculture are changing completely. Yields are becoming higher. And there is a lot of surplus grain available. So I don't think food or hunger will be a problem of the future.
So looking again, let's say to 2030, do you see sort of, Elon Musk, a Neuralink kind of idea, where maybe non-invasive, where we can communicate in some way, have virtual sort of immersion and augmented reality? Do you see seamless, almost sentient or peer-like sentient robotic devices, because AI is escalating so much? Do you see that rapid escalation, or you think it's going to play out over a longer period of time? And then there's this whole controversial idea of super intelligence. You think that's going to happen by 2030?
So I don't know if you ever read, you spoke of Star Trek, but I don't know if you ever read a comic strip called Jetsons. Where that was when I was probably 10, 11 years old, and I used to be fascinated by these little cars that would zip across all over the skies and land in buildings. A lot of it is coming true now. So I would not be very surprised if in the next 10 to 15 years we actually start to see the colonization of the moon. I would not be surprised if we are able to send a human being to Mars. I would not be surprised if our communication capabilities change. And I do want to add a rider. I think there are very significant disparities in the world on everything that we have spoken about. I mean, when I talk of technology, well, I'd like to believe that every single citizen in my country is empowered. The answer is no. I mean, efforts are being made where every single village of my country has electricity, and every single village of my country has broadband. But I do believe that, in what I call what is referred to as the trickle down effect. So if people at the top start to get augmented reality benefits and start to see a huge amount of technology in their lives, and they're able to communicate in ways and means that was never thought possible, then I think if not by 2030, 35, by 2050, or maybe that itself probably will be beyond my life, but in my children's life, I think the world will be a very different place for us to live in, and I'm sure it will be a better place.
So maybe this is a little bit controversial. The New York Times in the last few years have published ahead of the government releasing unidentified aerial phenomena, and then the government is saying, hey, they are real. They come out publicly and said they're real. Do you believe that there's going to be some kind of contact? Do you think there's more to it than that, or you prefer to leave that to speculation?
No, I'm not. I don't think so. I mean, I think I'm a Hindu, and we've always believed in rebirth. we believe our gods, were on earth. If you go back to some of our texts, I mean, obviously the historians always say that there's no evidence. But for our texts, which are 3,000 years old, we have one of our main gods who actually took a vehicle and flew from Sri Lanka to North India. Right now, I don't know what the truth is, or and there is so much information available on what could have happened. I mean, if you look at a temple in a city in Western India, it is and I'll send you the link to that temple. It's called the Kailash Temple. It is a huge structure built very intricately out of a single piece of rock. So they started chiseling from the top and came down. And now when scientists are evaluating it, and they say that the amount of rock that's cut would have taken some crazy number of thousands of people 30 years to build with tools which they can't even imagine. So I don't have any evidence, but I do believe that we don't know enough of what happened in the past or what will happen in the future, but our rational minds always dismisses something that we are not able to understand as either mythical or in the realm of imagination. So I do believe that there is something out there, and sometime they will find. People go around saying that NASA is hearing kinds of some kinds of voices coming or messages coming. I don't know what is true, but I do believe that we are not all by ourselves in not just our universe, but the entire solar system.
You talk about this amazing classical history that India has that alludes to so much more. And you have this very famous mathematician, Ramanujan, who his work is still being discovered in essence, because he discovered or produced the final sort of result and then work backwards and show the proof. And there's still so much of his work is still being utilized and discovered and really pretends way into the future. Mm-hmm. And he would claim sort of tap into something more, something universal. What are your thoughts on that then? Do you think those classical traditions in your literature indicate that there's something beyond, more like a universal consciousness or more?
Probably. I mean, again, it's very difficult to argue a case one way or the other, because there are believers and there are non-believers, and it's best to let the believers continue to do what they're doing, non-believers to keep saying that nothing's existed. But if you start looking at some of the events that keep taking place, you often ask yourself, how could this happen? I mean, whether it's Ramanujan's theories, or whether it is different kinds of music that is being evolved, or whether it is some of the old literatures, or our religious texts, and you wonder. I mean, what could have, as we say, ancient man, or 5,000-year-old man, how could he have thought of arrows in a battle which had nuclear capability, right? Who knows what was there earlier? But when you go and think about the civilizations, whether it's in Greece or whether it is in China, or whether it is the Indian civilization in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which is say 2,000 years old, you wonder. They had well-planned cities. They were not living on fruits and under trees. Well-planned cities, good drainage. So did we lose it all and then started to rediscover, or was it always there and we chose not to accept it, or was it never there? I mean, I don't think we'll ever get a clear answer on that.
Well, it's interesting, when you get into quantum physics and so on, and even Sir Roger Penrose, or Roger just won the Nobel Prize in physics, and he has these really interesting ideas around consciousness tied to quantum theory, and so what's happening is science is now discovering the classics in essence, right? That's we find Absolutely out more.
Right. So absolutely.
I'm going to end here with a few more questions, and one of them is, you play the Indian flute and you enjoy Indian classical music and so on. Is that from your childhood or is that later in life? I mean, where does that intersection happen?
So I used to learn how to play the flute, which is really a thin, long barrel of made of bamboo with 6 holes, which give you the notes. Um, it's not those very high technology flutes children, and I found that our children started using our flutes, my flutes as swords. So therefore, it came to a halt after that. But only 2 years ago, I decided to pick it up again. And now I'm learning it a little more classical. So every Monday morning, I have my class. I practice for 45 minutes, 4 or 5 days a week. And it's very, very satisfying. I mean, because I'm able to play different kinds of music. I have a teacher who comes home these days online. So it's just a love that I have for music, and I like to play it.
Just two more questions, and that is, you've got this remarkable narrative in your life. Where do you see yourself personally, let's say in 2030?
2030, I will be 74 years old, 10 years from now. I see myself fit, healthy. I see myself as extremely busy, not necessarily to make money, but to be able to keep giving back. And I see myself doing pretty much what I'm doing today, on a much, much larger scale, which is talking to people, writing much more, enjoying my music much more, playing golf twice a week, which I do even today, and generally be able to do what I want with my time rather than be dictated by anybody on what I should be doing with my time. And of course, I keep telling both my sons, and I hope they hear this last bit, that I hope I'm a grandfather several times by the time I'm 74.
And then Ashutosh, the final question is, what sort of final messages would you like to leave our global audience?
Well, I would say only one thing, and that is that do what you think is right, have the conviction to live by that thought, and don't deviate until you yourself believe that you need to make a change. Don't worry about what others say, what others think. Don't worry about, if I do this, what will my neighbor think or what will my friend think? Because remember, they are so busy with their own set of worries and concerns, they have no time to wonder what you are doing. So just do exactly what you think is right.
Ashutosh, I can see elements or roots in your father's upbringing as well. in your final messages to the audience. I really do appreciate you coming in and sharing so much wisdom and experience and insights with the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen, so much for inviting me, and I've really enjoyed my conversation with you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.